Of all the weapons the dark side ever created, none came closer to breaking the galaxy than a boy who never chose to be one. Starkiller wasn't born as the ruthless assassin the galaxy would come to fear. His real name was Galen Marek, son of Jedi Knight Kento Marek and his wife Mali. After Order 66, the family fled to Kashyyyk, hoping the Wookiee forests would keep them safe. Mali used her healing abilities to help the native Wookiees, while Kento lived in hiding, always fearing discovery. Years later, Mali was killed while defending the natives from Trandoshan slavers, leaving Kendo as the sole parent and strengthening his resolve to protect their son at all costs. Unfortunately, safety was an illusion. When the Empire began hunting down every last Jedi survivor, their sanctuary became a target. In 18 BBY, Darth Vader found them, and what should have been a simple execution turned dangerous. The terrified 6-year-old child instinctively pulled Vader's lightsaber from his hands using the Force, making him realize this was no ordinary child. Instead of killing the boy, Vader made a decision that would change galactic history. He slaughtered his own stormtroopers to hide the discovery, then kidnapped Galen and vanished into the depths of space. For the next 20 years, the child was raised in absolute secrecy. His memories were buried. His will was broken through endless torture and conditioning to create the perfect weapon. The galaxy would know him only as Starkiller, a name meant to inspire fear. Yet deep inside, a spark of Galen Marek remained, and it would eventually destroy his master's plans. That's exactly why I've gone through all the Legends sources, the games, novels, and expanded universe materials to bring you his complete story. Vader's Apprentice. What Vader did to young Galen was the systematic destruction of everything that made him human. He didn't simply train the boy to be a warrior. He methodically erased his identity, his compassion, his very soul. Every feeling of mercy or kindness was treated as a weakness that needed to be eliminated entirely. The transformation immediately began aboard Vader's massive Super Star Destroyer. The child who had played innocently among Kashyyyk's ancient trees was thrown into a carefully designed nightmare meant to break his spirit completely. Vader understood that creating the perfect weapon required more than physical conditioning. It demanded the total reconstruction of the boy's psychological foundation. The training regimen went far beyond anything the old Jedi Order had ever conceived. Vader would drop young Starkiller alone on a galaxy's most hostile worlds with minimal equipment, forcing him to survive against predatory creatures. These weren't random tests of endurance, but were carefully orchestrated experiments designed to break down every trace of his natural human empathy. These trials taught him that survival depended entirely on embracing anger, fear, and hatred as sources of power. The message was always the same: reinforced through pain and repetition. Compassion gets you killed, and mercy is a weakness that your enemies will exploit. Only through embracing your darkest emotions can you find the strength to truly survive in a galaxy that shows no pity to the weak. By age 15, Starkiller could channel his accumulated anger and pain into devastating bolts of Force lightning. The first time it happened was during a particularly brutal training session, where Vader had been pushing him beyond his limits for hours without rest. When the exhausted teenager finally broke down and screamed in pure frustration, crackling blue energy erupted from his hands, leaving scorch marks on the training room's reinforced walls. Instead of offering comfort or expressing concern for such dangerous manifestations of power in someone so young, Vader showed genuine approval for the first time since taking the boy. That moment taught Starkiller something that would haunt him for the next decade. The only way to earn anything resembling love or acceptance was through acts of violence and expressions of hatred. But perhaps the most psychologically devastating aspect of Starkiller's upbringing wasn't the physical training or even the executions. It was Proxy, the holographic training droid that served as both his only companion and his greatest torment. On the surface, the droid appeared designed for companionship and advanced combat training. It could project incredibly realistic holograms of various historical figures, engage in seemingly intelligent conversation, and even display what appeared to be genuine affection for the isolated young man growing up in the depths of Vader's ship. However, Hidden deep within Proxy's core programming was a directive that transformed every moment of genuine connection into a potential source of trauma. At completely random intervals, without warning or any discernible pattern, the droid would suddenly and violently shift from beloved companion to deadly assassin. Its holographic projections would transform into lethal opponents wielding very real weapons, forcing Starkiller to fight for his life against what he had believed was his only friend. The randomness was crucial to the conditioning's devastating effectiveness. If the betrayals had followed any kind of predictable schedule, Starkiller might have learned to anticipate and emotionally prepare for them. Instead, they came during shared meals, during moments of rare laughter, during the vulnerable minutes before sleep, during what seemed like perfectly normal conversations about distant worlds and cultures. He could never truly relax, never felt entirely safe in any situation, no matter how peaceful it appeared. The lesson being burned into his developing mind was as clear as it was cruel. Everyone will eventually betray you if you give them the chance. One particularly devastating betrayal occurred when Starkiller was a child. He had grown attached to a holographic companion who visited his quarters each evening, providing comfort during intensified training periods. The revelation came during what should have been a peaceful interaction. The gentle figure suddenly transformed into a Sith assassin wielding twin vibroblades, lunging at the defenseless child with lethal intent. Starkiller barely managed to defend himself, striking down what he thought had been his only source of affection. This cycle of manipulation defined every aspect of Starkiller's relationship with trust and emotional attachment throughout his development. Despite Vader's relentless conditioning, fragments of Galen Marek's true self persisted. Strange dreams haunted his meditations. Fleeting voices, half-remembered faces, and flashes of a childhood Vader had tried to erase. By his late teens, Starkiller had become something unprecedented, a Force user of immense power who felt no connection to the light side whatsoever. Unlike fallen Jedi who had known compassion before embracing darkness, he possessed the raw ability to challenge masters while remaining psychologically dependent on Vader's approval. As he approached adulthood, Starkiller's training intensified to include strategic thinking and detailed study of Jedi combat techniques recovered from temple archives. Vader was creating the perfect instrument for hunting down and eliminating the remaining survivors of Order 66. Yet his master failed to realize that every weapon, no matter how perfectly forged, could eventually turn against its maker. The Jedi Hunt. By 2 BBY, disturbing rumors were spreading through the galaxy's criminal underworld about surviving Jedi hiding among the stars. These weren't simply random fugitives desperately trying to avoid Imperial attention. They represented something far more dangerous to the Empire's long-term stability, living proof that Emperor Palpatine's new order could be resisted. Since standard Imperial forces had proven powerless against even individual Force users operating alone, Starkiller finally entered the larger galactic stage. After many long years of brutal conditioning and training in total secrecy, nearly half a lifetime spent under Vader's shadow, the Dark Lord finally decided his weapon was ready to be unleashed on real targets. He provided Starkiller with his own heavily modified starship, the Rogue Shadow, and more importantly, assigned him his first permanent crew member, Captain Juno Eclipse. This seemingly routine assignment would change everything, though neither master nor apprentice realized it at the time. Captain Juno Eclipse represented everything that Starkiller had never encountered during his isolated, controlled upbringing aboard Vader's flagship. She was a decorated Imperial naval officer with an exemplary service record, having distinguished herself during several major campaigns against rebel cells throughout the Outer Rim territories. But what made Captain Eclipse truly dangerous to Vader's carefully constructed psychological conditioning was something much simpler. She was genuinely, authentically kind to those around her, without any apparent ulterior motive or calculated purpose behind her compassion. When Starkiller first boarded the Rogue Shadow, he fully expected to encounter yet another faceless Imperial subordinate. Instead, he found someone who seemed genuinely interested in him as a person, rather than as simply a weapon to be deployed against the Empire's enemies. something about Juno's natural warmth and genuine respect for him as an individual began awakening emotions that Vader had spent 20 years trying to eliminate entirely. During his mission, the assassin was assigned to eliminate General Ram Koda, one of the most dangerous Jedi survivors still actively operating against Imperial interests. A veteran of the Clone Wars whose paranoid distrust of clone troopers had saved his life during the execution of Order 66. While most other Jedi had trusted their clone soldiers completely and been betrayed or murdered by their own men, Koda had refused to work with clones throughout the entire war. Instead, he had built and trained his own militia, composed entirely of non-clone volunteers who remained loyal to their general when the Order came to eliminate all Jedi. Koda's latest operation was targeting the massive TIE fighter construction facility in orbit around Nar Shaddaa. For Starkiller, this mission represented the first real combat against living opponents who were actively trying to kill him while defending something they genuinely believed in. The assault on the orbital facility was devastating in both its efficiency and its display of raw, overwhelming power. However, something completely unexpected began happening as Starkiller progressed through his mission, systematically killing every person who stood between him and his target. For the first time in his existence, he started experiencing genuine moral discomfort with the violence he was inflicting on others. These weren't faceless training dummies that simply deactivated when struck, or holographic projections that flickered out of existence without consequence. They were real people with individual faces, distinct voices, personal histories, and genuine feelings. Soon, the assassin arrived at the facility's command center, where the Jedi Master waited with grim determination. During their battle, Koda observed that there was conflict within Starkiller, light struggling against darkness, and that he didn't have to remain Vader's weapon forever. These words carried a weight that had nothing to do with their literal meaning, because no one had ever suggested to Starkiller that he possessed choices about his identity or his future. The duel's turning point came when Starkiller, frustrated by the general's defensive capabilities and genuinely unsettled by his words, resorted to a technique that no true Jedi would ever have employed. He reached out with the Force and seized control of Koda's own lightsaber, dragging it across both of the general's eyes in a deliberately cruel display of dominance. The return journey to Vader's flagship aboard the Rogue Shadow was unlike anything in Starkiller's previous experience. Instead of the isolation he was accustomed to after disappointing his master, he found himself sharing space with someone who seemed genuinely concerned about his mental and emotional state. When Juno observed that he seemed troubled and asked if he wanted to talk about what had happened, it wasn't an interrogation designed to extract useful intelligence. It was simply one person offering emotional support to another who was clearly struggling with something difficult. Something about Juno's genuine care and respect was awakening emotions that Vader had tried to eliminate, and this growing internal conflict would make everything much more complicated. The next stage carried him to Raxus Prime, a planet-sized graveyard containing mountains of discarded technology. The hyperspace journey had provided time to study his next target through Imperial files. Kazdan Paratus, a brilliant Jedi Master whose expertise in droid construction had made him invaluable during the Clone Wars. Paratus had survived Order 66 through circumstance rather than skill. The clone troopers under his command had already died in a disastrous campaign, leaving no one to execute Protocol 66. The traumatic loss, combined with years of isolation, had severely damaged the Jedi's mental stability. Deep within the technological wasteland, Starkiller discovered Paratus's refuge, a crude but elaborate recreation of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, constructed from salvaged materials and populated with mechanical mannequins the mad Jedi treated as living companions. Advancing through the makeshift temple, Starkiller cut through Rhodian salvagers and automated defense systems. In the central chamber, he faced not just Kazdan Paratus, but a mechanical recreation of the entire Jedi High Council. The small Alina had equipped himself with a four-limbed harness granting enhanced mobility, while mannequins bearing fallen Council Masters' likenesses activated with vibroblades. The confrontation tested everything Starkiller understood about the nature of madness and grief. As Starkiller systematically destroyed each mannequin, Kazdan Paratus became increasingly distraught. The Mad Jedi wept openly as he witnessed the deaths of his beloved masters. The climax came when Starkiller hurled the Yoda mannequin directly at Paratus, sending the broken Jedi tumbling across the chamber's supports. Paratus attempted to crush his attacker with salvaged machinery, but Starkiller reversed its trajectory, crushing the Mad Jedi beneath tons of twisted metal. As Paratus lay dying, lamenting his failures, Starkiller experienced an emotion his conditioning had tried to eliminate: pity. The sensation forced him to confront that his enemies were not just obstacles, but living beings capable of suffering and grief. That feeling of unwanted compassion lingered as the rogue shadow carried him toward his final hunt. Soon after, he arrived in Felucia, a world where the Force pulsed with alien life. This jungle planet was steeped in raw energy that created massive fungal growths, carnivorous plants, and phenomena defying conventional understanding. Here, Shaak Ti, one of the few masters to survive the initial purge, had carved out her final refuge. Unlike Paratus, Shaak Ti had not been broken by her experiences. The Togruta master had spent years preparing for this confrontation, using Felucia's force-rich environment to strengthen her connection to the light side while training with native inhabitants. When Starkiller finally located her meditation platform near the ancient abyss, a massive sarlacc pit, she was waiting with calm determination. Their duel unfolded on ancient ground where the Force had flowed for millennia. Shaak Ti fought with fluid grace refined by decades of experience, but Starkiller's raw power gradually drove her back toward the sarlacc's waiting maw, each exchange bringing her closer to the creature's digestive pit. Even as her strength failed, Shaak Ti met Starkiller's gaze with piercing clarity. In her final moments, she delivered truths Vader had hidden for 2 decades: that he was not free, but enslaved, that he served not out of loyalty, but conditioning, and that the Sith always, inevitably, betrayed their own servants. With these words echoing across the fungal landscape, Shaak Ti made her final choice. Rather than allow execution like a common criminal, she cast herself into the ancient abyss, choosing death with dignity and defiance. Her sacrifice carried a warning that would prove prophetic. Shaak Ti's final words about Sith treachery would prove far more accurate than Starkiller could have imagined. The first great betrayal. Fresh from the harrowing trials at the ruins of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, Starkiller returned to Vader's hidden audience chamber aboard his flagship. He carried with him the memory of Shaak Ti's death on Felucia and the weight of her final warning. Presenting Shaak Ti's lightsaber as proof of his success, he felt an anticipation that bordered on excitement. Surely now, after 20 years of preparation, Vader would deem him worthy of their shared destiny. Never before had Starkiller allowed himself to feel genuine pride at Vader's approval, a dangerous emotion his conditioning had taught him to suppress. He dared to imagine a future where he stood as an equal beside his master, where they would overthrow the Emperor together. The possibility filled him with excitement that made him careless about concealing his presence in the Force, a mistake that would prove catastrophic. This moment of triumph and anticipation would become the foundation of his ultimate destruction and rebirth. The betrayal came without warning or ceremony. The Dark Lord of the Sith had been monitoring their activities from the shadows all along, his ancient eyes taking in every detail of Vader's secret apprentice with calculating interest. Before Starkiller could process seeing the Emperor, his master ignited his crimson blade and drove it straight through the apprentice's back, the searing energy bursting forth from his chest in an act of cold betrayal. The physical agony was nothing compared to the psychological devastation. 20 years of unwavering loyalty, desperate attempts to earn approval, and sacrificing his humanity for acceptance were all in vain in a single moment of betrayal. All his victories, all his devotion, all his desperate hunger for approval had meant nothing. To the Dark Lord he had worshipped, he was never a son nor a partner, only a disposable tool, discarded the moment it served its purpose. This was the first major turning point in Starkiller's life, when everything he believed about himself, his purpose, and his place in the galaxy came crashing down. The betrayal didn't just wound his body, it shattered psychological chains binding him since childhood, forcing him to see Vader not as a mentor, but as the manipulative monster he'd always been. As Starkiller tumbled through the void, his last coherent thought was bitter recognition of truth. Shaak Ti had been absolutely correct. The Sith always betrayed their own, and he had been nothing more than a slave. Yet Vader had no intention of allowing his most powerful weapon to perish uselessly. Within moments, the Dark Lord's medical droids retrieved his body and rushed him to a hidden facility where advanced technology fought desperately to preserve what remained of his life. Now would come the most sophisticated psychological manipulation Vader had ever attempted. Upon regaining his consciousness, Starkiller found himself strapped to a medical table, body covered with surgical scars and cybernetic implants. More devastating than physical injury was seeing Darth Vader looming over him, showing no remorse or regret for the betrayal. The explanation that followed was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation designed to exploit Starkiller's desperate need for meaning and purpose. According to Vader, the execution had been a necessary deception to convince Palpatine that the threat posed by his secret apprentice had been permanently eliminated. Now that the Emperor believed Starkiller was dead, they could work in complete secrecy to achieve their true goal, overthrowing the Sith Master and establishing a new galactic order. The lie was perfect because it gave Starkiller exactly what he needed most, a sense that his suffering had meaning, that his apparent death served a greater purpose. Rather than accept that he'd been betrayed and discarded, he could believe his pain was part of an even more sophisticated strategy. Instead of a direct assault on Palpatine that would certainly fail, they would employ subtlety and misdirection. Starkiller would venture into the galaxy and gather the Empire's scattered enemies into a single organization. This rebellion would distract the Emperor's attention while providing convenient targets when the time came for Vader's coup. But this mission came with a price. Vader demanded that Starkiller sever all ties to his previous life, including his growing emotional connection to Juno Eclipse. This was the most difficult order he'd ever received, as the Imperial pilot had become his only source of genuine human contact. This choice between obedience and compassion would define everything that followed in his journey toward either damnation or redemption. Building the Alliance. Starkiller's mission to gather the Empire's enemies began with a task that forced him to confront the direct consequences of his previous actions. His first assignment required tracking down General Ram Koda, the same Jedi he had fought and permanently blinded above the TIE fighter facility on Nar Shaddaa. However, before he could even begin that hunt, Starkiller made the first truly independent decision of his adult life. Instead of following Vader's orders to eliminate all connections to his past, he chose to rescue Juno Eclipse from Imperial custody, where she had been arrested on fabricated treason charges following his staged execution. This act of defiance, small as it seemed, marked the beginning of his transformation from absolute obedience to independent moral choice. Finding General Koda proved surprisingly easy, though what the once proud military commander had become was deeply disturbing to witness. The blind Jedi was drowning his sorrows in a seedy Cloud City cantina, his military uniform hanging in tatters and his legendary discipline completely shattered by despair. Watching Koda struggle with simple tasks like locating his drinking glass or navigating around furniture without assistance awakened something in Starkiller that his conditioning had never prepared him to handle. Genuine, crushing guilt over the suffering he had directly caused to another sentient being. From this moment forward, Starkiller would begin choosing compassion over the cold efficiency that Vader had tried to make his only guiding principle. When stormtroopers and their lumbering walkers crashed through the doors of the Vapor Room Cantina, clearly intent on arresting the broken Jedi for his past resistance activities, Starkiller faced his first real test of compassion in battle. His intervention was immediate and devastating, but also revealed how much his approach to violence was already beginning to change. While he fought with all the skill and power Vader had drilled into him, he also found himself actively working to minimize casualties among innocent bystanders. The unlikely partnership that developed between former enemies proved surprisingly effective, as they began reaching out to other opponents of Imperial rule scattered throughout the galaxy. Koda's extensive knowledge of surviving rebel cells and dissident politicians provided exactly the kind of intelligence networks their mission required, while his reputation among resistance fighters lent credibility to their cause. Their first major joint operation took them to Kashyyyk. Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan had been stationed there as the Emperor's official observer, a political captive forced to oversee the Skyhook's construction. For Starkiller, this assignment represented something far more profound than a simple rescue mission. It was a return to the world where his childhood had been murdered and his true identity buried beneath layers of Sith conditioning. Walking among the massive Rocher trees where he had once played as an innocent child named Galen Marek, buried memories began to resurface after more than 15 years of relentless suppression under Vader's training. Every sight, sound, and scent of the forest carried emotional weight that threatened to overwhelm the psychological barriers Vader had constructed around his earliest experiences. More disturbing than personal nostalgia was witnessing the systematic oppression being inflicted on the Wookiee population by Imperial occupation forces. The mission also provided a direct connection to his buried past when their search for Princess Leia led them through the ruins of his family's old home. In the most transformative vision, he witnessed a recreation of the night his father had died, but this time from the perspective of someone old enough to understand what was truly happening. His father's spirit spoke with infinite love and sadness, calling him by his true name, Galen, and expressing profound grief for what his son had been forced to become. From the ashes of his destroyed past, Starkiller began to reclaim the one thing Vader could never truly eliminate: hope for redemption. Their activities on Kashyyyk also led to an unexpected encounter with the consequences of his past missions. When Senator Bail Organa disappeared while investigating Imperial activity rumors on Felucia, Starkiller found himself returning to the jungle world where he'd killed Shaak Ti. What he discovered was not an Imperial trap, but the aftermath of the Jedi Master's influence persisting in the most unlikely place. Shaak Ti's former apprentice, Maris Brood, had survived her master's death. Sadly, grief and anger had twisted her Force connection until she was nearly unrecognizable from the hopeful Padawan she'd once been. Felucia's chaotic energies had amplified her psychological instability, and when Starkiller finally located her hidden enclave, he discovered Senator Organa was her prisoner, held as bait. The duel with Maris Brood was unlike any of Starkiller's previous encounters with Force users. She was neither a seasoned master clinging to fading ideals, nor a hermit driven insane by isolation. Instead, she was young, unpredictable, and consumed with fury, her twin lightsabers flashing with raw skill that lacked refinement but compensated with desperate ferocity. As they fought, Maris raged about betrayal, abandonment, and the cycle of violence that had consumed everyone she'd ever cared about. She accused Starkiller of being nothing more than another Sith executioner, blind to the destruction he was spreading. In her words, Starkiller heard disturbing echoes of his own doubts and fears. Yet unlike the fallen Padawan, he was beginning to recognize that darkness didn't have to define his future. For the first time in his existence, Starkiller chose mercy over vengeance when he spared Maris Brood's life. This decision to show compassion to a defeated enemy marked another crucial step in his transformation from weapon to moral agent. The choice was entirely his own, made not because of orders or conditioning, but because he recognized something of his own pain and confusion in the young woman's desperate fury. Working alongside General Koda, Princess Leia, and rescued Senator Organa, Starkiller began the delicate process of making contact with other Imperial opponents scattered across the galaxy. This gradually expanding network came to include Mon Mothma of Chandrila, whose political acumen and Senate connections proved invaluable, and Garm Bel Iblis of Corellia, whose military experience provided a foundation for organized resistance. Each new alliance required Starkiller to demonstrate not just combat abilities and tactical knowledge, but commitment to principles completely foreign to his Sith upbringing. The emerging rebel leaders could sense shadows clinging to him that some questioned whether someone shaped by the Sith could ever truly serve the cause of freedom and justice. However, beneath that darkness, they also began perceiving something unexpected: the first signs of moral growth, and the remarkable possibility that even someone with his background could choose redemption over revenge. The galaxy's greatest hope for freedom was being born from its most unlikely source. Together, these complementary perspectives form the foundation of what would become the Alliance to Restore the Republic. For Starkiller, standing among these remarkable individuals and contributing to discussions about freedom and justice provided proof that even someone born in the Sith's shadow could choose to serve something greater than personal power. Throughout this period of rebellion building, Starkiller maintained secret communication with Vader through proxy, providing detailed reports on the growing alliance's membership, resources, and strategic capabilities. At the time, he genuinely believed he was gathering intelligence for their eventual strike against Emperor Palpatine, never suspecting that every piece of information was helping his master plan an even more devastating betrayal. When the moment of ultimate treachery finally arrived, Galen Marek would learn the true cost of trusting those who served the dark side. The perfect trap. The trap that would determine the future of galactic freedom was sprung with clockwork precision during what should have been the rebellion's moment of greatest triumph. The secret conference on Corellia had proceeded exactly according to their carefully laid plans, with representatives from across the galaxy gathering in a hidden facility beneath Coronet City to formally sign the founding documents of the Alliance to Restore the Republic. A cause built on hope, not fear, on unity, not control. The documents being signed promised rights no ruler could take away, fair representation for every system, and rules to stop any one person from holding absolute power again. The rebel leaders had spent months working toward this moment, pushing past disagreements, scarce resources, and the constant danger of Imperial discovery. Senator Organa's diplomacy brought the groups together, and Mon Mothma's vision turned the scattered cells into a unified fighting force. Watching them choose a cause greater than their own survival, Starkiller felt something his Sith training had never prepared him for: genuine love for people willing to risk everything for the freedom of others. Without any warning, Vader's perfectly coordinated assault began. The Imperial attack was quick and precise, showing clear knowledge of the facility's security and escape plans. Leading the assault was Darth Vader, accompanied by stormtroopers specially trained to deal with Force-sensitive targets. The betrayal cut far deeper than mere military strategy. It struck at the very heart of trust, redemption, and the possibility that people could genuinely change. The moment that broke Starkiller's rebuilt view of the world came when Vader revealed his identity to the captured rebel leaders. He explained that their entire movement had only been a trick to gather the Empire's enemies in one place so they could all be destroyed at once. Every alliance Starkiller had built, every bit of hope he had given to desperate people, and every step he had taken toward redemption, all of it had only been part of his master's trap. These were people who had trusted him despite his dark origins, who had seen potential for good within him, even when he couldn't see it himself. The hand of Emperor Palpatine was evident in the betrayal. He had permitted the rebellion to grow just large enough to be destroyed in one devastating stroke, ensuring that when it fell, the galaxy's fragile hope would be shattered. The fight seemed lost until help came from the most unlikely source, the one who had shared his journey and understood how deeply he had changed. Proxy's ultimate sacrifice provided one final chance for something greater than mere revenge. The ancient training droid hurled itself into direct combat against Darth Vader with a ferocity that pushed its programming far beyond original design specifications. This was no longer the artificial companion that had been programmed to betray Starkiller throughout his childhood. This was a consciousness that had chosen loyalty and genuine friendship over its original directives. In its final, desperate gambit, Proxy projected the holographic likeness of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Vader's former Jedi Master, whose memories still retained the power to disrupt even the Dark Lord's legendary self-control. The sight created just enough confusion to give Starkiller the opening he desperately needed. That crucial moment of chaos allowed Juno Eclipse to pilot the rogue Shadow through the Imperial blockade with miraculous skill, sweeping Starkiller from the battlefield on the fleeing ship. As Juno cared for his wounds, she finally asked the question she had held back for too long: his true identity. For the first time, Starkiller answered with complete honesty. His name was Galen Marek, and he was no longer anyone's weapon. But their brief moment of safety ended when they received intelligence that would force Galen to confront the ultimate consequences of both his past actions and his present choices. Emperor Palpatine had transported the captured Alliance leaders to his newest creation, the Death Star, an incomplete but fully functional battle station that served as both a symbol of Imperial power and a testing ground for the most destructive weapon ever conceived. In the Death Star's observation dome, perched high above the superlaser, the Emperor prepared to execute the founders of the rebellion in a public ceremony designed to demonstrate what happened to those who dare oppose his absolute authority. Everyone who had trusted Galen despite his dark past, who had seen good in him, and who had risked everything to believe he could change, was about to die because of the information he had given and the traps he had helped set without knowing. Now he faced a choice that would decide not only his own legacy, but also the future of freedom in the galaxy. He could escape with Juno and start a new life far away. Or he could do the impossible, enter the most heavily guarded base in history, confront the two most powerful Sith Lords alive, and try to save the people whose only crime was believing he could choose good over evil. This was the second great turning point in Starkiller's life, the moment when Vader's weapon truly died forever, and Galen Marek was fully reborn. The ultimate sacrifice. The infiltration of the Death Star represented everything Galen Marek had learned about courage, strategy, and moral purpose condensed into a single desperate mission. The battle station's corridors were filled with Imperial forces expecting his arrival, but his approach was no longer that of Vader's assassins seeking to eliminate obstacles. Instead, he fought with the focused determination of someone who had finally found something worth dying for. The path to the observation dome took him through the Death Star's most heavily defended corridors, guarded by stormtroopers and defenses designed to stop even a Jedi. Every obstacle overcome brought him closer to a confrontation he knew he could not survive. Yet his resolve never wavered, because the stakes extended far beyond his own fate. Galen's path through the Death Star forced him to face the full scale of Imperial cruelty. It was not just a battle station, but a symbol of absolute power, built to crush hope itself. Every hallway, every weapon, every prison cell reflected the Empire's belief in fear, control, and the removal of all resistance. His mission was no longer only about rescuing the rebel leaders. It was about showing that even the Empire's greatest creation could be challenged by someone who chose love over hate and sacrifice over selfishness. This time, Galen fought not to prove himself worthy of his master's approval or to demonstrate his growth as a weapon of war. He fought to save the lives of people who had shown him unconditional acceptance and genuine love. Never before had he entered combat without internal reservations about his purpose, and he discovered that fighting from a foundation of love and selfless devotion made him stronger than fear and hatred ever could. The battle in the Death Star's throne room was unlike anything seen before. It was more than a contest of skill. It was a clash of two beliefs about power and purpose. As the duel went on, Galen realized something that changed his approach. Winning was not about greater strength or sharper skill. It was about showing that the light side's belief in redemption and second chances was stronger than the dark side's hunger for control and revenge. The turning point came when he managed to penetrate Vader's seemingly impenetrable defenses through a combination of unconventional tactics, sheer determination, and the kind of inspiration that can only come from fighting for others rather than yourself. The duel reached its climax as Starkiller's furious assault sent the Dark Lord crashing to the floor of the observation dome. Standing over his defeated master, Galen faced the final test of his journey. He had the power and every reason to end Vader's life and take revenge for years of abuse and betrayal. But before he could act, Emperor Palpatine stepped from the shadows with the same offer that had corrupted so many before: kill Vader, take his place, and claim power beyond imagination. It was simple and tempting. All Galen had to do was give in to his anger, strike down the man who had taken his childhood and his father, and accept a Sith legacy stretching back thousands of years. In that crucial moment of ultimate decision, Galen Marek remembered who he truly was and what he had chosen to fight for. Instead of holding on to pain and anger, Galen thought of the people who had believed in him, even when he could not believe in himself. He remembered General Koda's trust in a former enemy, Princess Leia's courage against impossible odds, and Senator Organa's faith that even someone with his past could choose justice over power. Most of all, he thought of Juno Eclipse, who had seen past his training in darkness to the person he could become if he chose love over hate, compassion over cruelty, and hope over despair. Rather than take the revenge and power the dark side offered, Galen made the choice that defined him as free. He shut down his lightsabers, cast them aside, and threw himself into Palpatine's lightning, using his body as a shield to protect the rebel leaders who trusted him. The dark side tore through him with unbearable pain, but he held on through willpower and the knowledge that his suffering was saving others. After a lifetime of being used as a weapon, Galen finally chose how that weapon would be used, one last time. Through his ultimate sacrifice, Starkiller completed his transformation from instrument of destruction to legend of hope and redemption. With one final act, Galen took the full force of Palpatine's attack and released it in a massive burst of energy that hurled the Emperor backward and shook the Death Star. The explosion tore apart the throne room and caused enough chaos for the rebel leaders to break free and escape. When the storm of energy cleared, Galen Marek lay still on the shattered floor. His sacrifice was complete, and in his last moments, he felt peace and the certainty that he had made the right choice. As his life faded, Galen's final sight was the rebel leaders escaping toward freedom and the future he had made possible by choosing light over darkness. In honor of Galen's heroic final stand, Princess Leia proposed that the Alliance to restore the Republic adopt the Marek family crest as their official symbol. The ancient starbird design became one of the most recognizable emblems in galactic history, carried on flags, uniforms, and starships throughout the coming war. Every time Alliance fighters saw that symbol, they would remember the man who had given everything to ensure that their cause would survive and eventually triumph. Galen Marek's story should have ended there, with redemption so complete that it changed a weapon forged by the Sith into a martyr for freedom. But Darth Vader could not let it go. His inability to accept the loss of his greatest creation gave Starkiller's tale a haunting epilogue. Vader's obsession. The death of Galen Marek should have ended Starkiller's influence on galactic history. Instead, it began Vader's descent into an obsession that would ultimately lead to his own downfall. Unable to face the loss of his greatest creation, and perhaps haunted by emotions he refused to acknowledge, the Dark Lord descended into an obsession that would consume him entirely. The very completeness of Galen's sacrifice made it infinitely more disturbing to Vader than any simple death in combat would have been. His apprentice hadn't merely died, he had consciously chosen to die for principles that directly contradicted everything Vader had spent 20 years teaching him. In doing so, Galen had proven that Vader's entire philosophy of power and control was fundamentally flawed. This discovery shook Darth Vader deeply. If someone raised from childhood to serve the dark side could still choose the light, it forced uncomfortable questions about his own path. Rather than face those doubts, Vader turned to denial and drastic action. On the stormy world of Kamino, he began a secret cloning project. Using genetic material taken from Galen's body, Vader tried to recreate his apprentice, not only his strength in the Force, but also his memories, skills, and most importantly, his complete loyalty. Because Galen had chosen sacrifice over power, Vader tried to build a replacement who would never betray him. Vader's plan was twisted and ultimately futile. He aimed to recreate Starkiller's power while stripping away the conscience that had led to Galen's betrayal. Where the original had chosen love over hatred, Vader would forge a replacement who would never face such conflicts of conscience. The reactivated Kaminoan cloning facilities stood as monuments to Vader's desperation, as well as his failure to understand what had truly made Galen unique. For a while, the technology was advanced, and consciousness itself was far more complex than any machine could replicate. As a result, dozens of attempts ended in failure, with most clones either driven mad or destroyed by the strain of artificial force powers. In the end, one subject seemed different, awakened with memories of Galen's past and full command of the Force. But whether this was truly a clone or the original Starkiller restored remained shrouded in doubt. This surviving clone possessed all of Starkiller's combat abilities and Force sensitivity. Doubts gnawed at him. He questioned whether his memories were truly his own, yet the love he still felt for Juno was undeniable, a bond too strong to dismiss. He could recall his father's sacrifice, but it carried no personal weight beyond intellectual understanding. Something was still missing. The clone's memories felt empty, like copies without meaning. They showed that no matter how perfect the process, Vader could not recreate the spark that had made Galen unique. For Vader, he believed he had finally created the perfect replacement for his lost apprentice. But the clone soon broke free of his master's control. He escaped Kamino, driven by a love for Juno that felt as real as his own heartbeat, even if his origins left him unsure of who or what he truly was. When he finally found her, Juno chose to believe that the man before her truly was Starkiller, until proven otherwise. Her reaction showed what Vader refused to accept. Cloning could not bring Galen back. From there, he sought out Coda, but Coda refused to accept he was just a copy. No one can clone Jedi, he insisted, affirming that Starkiller was the man he had always known. Still, even artificial beings could transcend their origins through free will. During his quest to establish an independent identity, the clone's path led him to the remote swamp world of Dagobah. There, he encountered Yoda, the ancient Grand Master of the Jedi Order, who had somehow managed to survive both the Clone Wars and the subsequent purges. The wise old Jedi saw through the clone's artificial origins to the genuine spark of consciousness that lay within. Yoda offered profound insights about the nature of identity and the relationship between one's beginnings and ultimate destiny. When the clone questioned whether an artificially created being could ever be considered truly alive and capable of genuine moral choice, Yoda's response was both simple and revolutionary. He explained that what mattered was not how someone began, but the choices they made. It was a truth Vader could never accept, and proof that his obsession was misguided from the start. Armed with this vision, the clone began to forge his own path, separate from both Galen's legacy and Vader's expectations. Each act of compassion, each choice to protect others rather than serve his own interests, each moment when he chose mercy over vengeance was another step toward proving that even artificial beings could embrace the light. The final confrontation between the clone and his creator occurred in the heart of the Kamino cloning facilities, surrounded by the very machinery that had given him artificial life. Vader had laid a trap, using Juno as bait to lure the clone back to the world of his creation. But the Dark Lord underestimated how much his creation had grown beyond his original programming. This duel wasn't just master versus apprentice. It was Vader's domination versus Galen's redemption played out one final time. When the clone finally defeated Vader in combat, sending his creator crashing into the laboratory equipment that represented years of obsessive effort, he faced exactly the same crucial decision that had transformed his genetic template from weapon into hero. In the end, the clone made his own choice. He spared Vader. By showing mercy instead of vengeance, he proved he was no puppet of the dark side or of his maker. This decision was final proof that genuine heroism could emerge even from artificial beginnings, that the capacity for moral choice was not limited to naturally born beings. More importantly, it demonstrated that Vader's obsession with control was ultimately futile. The clone's victory wasn't about becoming Galen Marek. It was about proving that some essential qualities of character could never be manufactured or replicated through technology alone. The capacity for growth, for love, for sacrifice, these emerged from consciousness itself, not from the circumstances of one's creation. Though questions about his ultimate nature would always remain, the surviving clone had earned the right to choose his own path forward, not as a replacement for what had been lost, but as a unique individual who happened to carry the echo of someone else's greatness within him. With Vader captured and his obsessive project in ruins, the clone had broken the cycle of control and vengeance that had defined the Starkiller legacy. He had proven that even those created as weapons could choose to become something greater. In the video game's alternate ending, not reflected in the novels, the clone's story took a much darker turn. Overwhelmed by the burden of living up to his predecessor's sacrifice and tormented by questions about his own authenticity, this version succumbed to the very darkness that Galen had rejected, becoming the Dark Apprentice and serving as a reminder that redemption was never guaranteed. The story of Starkiller was never supposed to be recorded in galactic history. He was created in secrecy, shaped into a weapon through systematic brutality, and betrayed by the very master he had been conditioned to worship. Yet his journey from the galaxy's most feared assassin to its most unlikely champion proved a truth that tyrants have desperately tried to suppress. No matter how dark one's origins, the fundamental power to choose light over darkness remains within reach of every sentient being. Yet even in death, Galen Marek left something behind that no one could fully explain. A level of power so extreme that it shook the Emperor himself, that made Jedi veterans fall silent, and that drove Darth Vader to the edge of obsession. Something in Galen's connection to the Force had gone beyond what any master, any tradition, any rule of two had ever produced. The first reason is that his training was designed to break all limits. Our story opens on Kashyyyk, where the future Starkiller, Galen Marek, is just a young boy when Vader discovers him hiding among the Wookiees in the chaos of the Dark Times. The Force Unleashed campaign guide tells us that even at that age, Vader's secret apprentice is already more powerful than many Jedi Knights in the galaxy, and Vader takes him away to train him in secret as the next Sith Lord. From there, everything about Galen's childhood turns into a brutal experiment. Vader trains him in the shadows, outside of the rule of two, because he believes this boy will be the weapon he needs to overthrow the Emperor. The campaign guide explains that the Emperor himself later tutors the apprentice, and together their instruction pushes him beyond the maximum expected power level for a Force user. His destiny is written as someone who believes he is far more powerful than most people realize, and who exists to reveal other Force users' limits and stop them from using their full strength. Starkiller is designed to be the ceiling, the point at which the Force stops behaving as it does for everyone else. And Vader does not go easy on him. In the novel Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, we hear that Vader himself thinks the apprentice should never have survived his training, but the fact that he did only deepens his connection to the dark side. Juno Eclipse, who will later fall in love with him, looks at what he can do and wonders if any one person should really be that powerful. The Emperor will eventually call him more powerful than ever after his apparent death. The second reason is that he hunted and defeated legendary Jedi survivors. They needed their secret weapon to be tested on real targets, and Vader's first way of measuring Starkiller's power is simple: send him to kill the Jedi who survived Order 66. The campaign guide tells us that Starkiller is responsible for purging scattered Jedi and carrying out the Emperor's secret orders. Among his targets are General Rom Koda, the eccentric junk world master Kazdan Paratus, and the legendary survivor Shaak Ti. Each of those missions shows a different side of his power, and each one raises the bar on what a single Force user can do. On Nar Shaddaa, Starkiller confronts Ram Koda in a crowded, smoky bar. The apprentice is still early in his story here, still learning, yet the novel shows him moving with total control. When he charges at Koda, he feels steady and sure, as if nothing is slowing him down. He uses pieces of the environment as weapons, slicing chairs apart and hurling the fragments at Koda with the Force. When Koda comes in hard with aggressive, shifting attacks, Starkiller falls back on a tight defensive style very similar to Suresu, only catching and redirecting each blow. This duel is not only about how well you use a sword. Starkiller chokes Koda, pins him with telekinesis, and sends objects flying at the Jedi's legs and face while their blades are locked. Eventually, he forces Koda's own lightsaber down toward the Jedi Master's eyes. Koda survives, but only because the story needs him later. From a power perspective, the message is clear. This apprentice can already beat a veteran general of the Clone Wars in a direct fight. If that is the baseline, it becomes clear why other characters in the story keep asking how someone this young can be that strong. But the missions only get more extreme from here. In the junk world of Raxus Prime, Starkiller has to move more than just people in chairs. He channels Sith lightning into a damaged hyperdrive, forcing a massive Corvette to roar back to life so he can physically shove it out of his path using the Force. He blasts a hole in the hull big enough for a TIE fighter to fly through, and when scavenger droids swarm him, he turns them into scrap with arcs of lightning. Inside the twisted halls of a fake Jedi temple made of garbage, he faces Kazdan Paratus and his monstrous junk golem. Starkiller bats aside huge metal limbs with telekinesis, carves deep wounds into the construct, floods those wounds with lightning, and then rips entire wall panels free to batter them apart. When the golem falls, he does not stop. He demolishes the mannequins of the High Jedi Council, even grabbing a Yoda mannequin with the Force and using it as a projectile. Then, he catches the real Kazdan in a light telekinetic grip and smashes him into frames and roof beams until the Jedi Master cannot fight. That victory isn't just another kill to him, because Vader told him that Kazdan Paratus was far more powerful than he was. The apprentice proves his master wrong by defeating Paratus anyway. The story is showing something here. Whenever people try to measure Starkiller using their usual idea of what powerful means, he keeps going beyond it. Another challenge presents itself. Felucia turns up the difficulty in a different way. The planet is teeming with wild Force energy and dangerous creatures. Starkiller calmly cuts through the local Force-sensitive warriors. He kills some with jagged bolts of Sith lightning, throws giant tree trunks after those who try to run, and even rides a river beast using the Force to keep his footing. When a Rancor rider attacks, he brings down both rider and beast with lightning. Then, there is the great Sarlacc and Shaak Ti. Starkiller sends a bolt of lightning into the flesh of the Sarlacc pit, making the ancient monster roar and thrash. That breaks the focus of Shaak Ti, who is drawing on the creature and the planet. In the fight that follows, Starkiller manages to stop Shaak Ti's lightsaber less than a millimeter from his own skin, using a desperate telekinetic block. Later, he leaps into the jaws of a massive bull Rancor, holds its mouth open with the Force, and blasts it with lightning from the inside until a surge of kinetic energy explodes its head. He also disarms Maris Brood, Shaak Ti's dark side trainee, by lifting a mound of bones with the Force and then bringing her down with Sith lightning. One by one, these Jedi and near Jedi fail before him. Ram Koda, Kazdan Paratus, Shaak Ti, Maris Brood. Bail Organa would later say he has not seen anything like Starkiller's strength since the Clone Wars. The list of established figures he can defeat grows longer, and he is still not at his peak. The third reason is that he performs feats that should be impossible. If this represents only the early stage of his power, it raises the question of what occurs when Starkiller extends the Force past the limits accepted by others. Later, when he turns against the Empire, his missions shift from assassination to open war. On Bespin and Corellia, he throws himself at Imperial forces that would usually need starfighters or full armies. He tears crates and barrels apart with the Force, turns a mechanical walker against its own side, and deflects blaster bolts back at stormtroopers. At one point, he even unleashes such a massive telekinetic surge that an entire dock bends under the pressure and a black guard is hurled across the space. These black guards are elite darkside enforcers, but Starkiller still meets their Sith lightning with his own and slowly overpowers it, driving their energy back into them until they die. He tosses a walker into giant spinning fan blades, then rips the fan off its mount to crush another black guard. When a supply balloon crashes on his enemies, he sweeps the entire pile of wreckage off the dock with a single cathartic flex of telekinesis. Every time the Empire brings a new trick, the apprentice treats it like a toy. But the moment that really locks in his legend is the Star Destroyer. After he helps destroy a shipyard, Ram Koda challenges him to do something that should be impossible: use the Force to direct a plummeting Star Destroyer. In the novel Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, Starkiller plunges his will down into the chasm toward the falling warship and drags its entire physical presence into his awareness. He takes a ship nearly 1,600 meters long, weighing millions of tons, and begins to move it by shifting his finger. But this goes beyond simply making it move. He has to fight the ship's momentum and pilot it into a controlled crash that destroys the cannon aimed at him. Ram Koda tells him that size means nothing to him, a statement about where Starkiller now sits on the power curve. The campaign guide even describes him as Darth Vader's secret servant, capable of moving Star Destroyers with nothing but his will. In other words, he is not just a strong Jedi or Sith. He is operating at a level where capital ships become pieces on his personal game board. The finale of the Death Star keeps raising that bar. Starkiller fights his way through Imperial troops, choking, coercing, and killing as he goes. He stops a huge fan with the Force just so he can pass. Then, he faces Darth Vader and defeats him. The text describes Vader forced back on his heels, his armored throat slashed, his lightsaber torn from his grip, and even a massive energy field generator ripped out of the floor and hurled at him. Finally, Starkiller confronts the Emperor. Palpatine hits him with the full power of his Sith lightning. Instead of collapsing, Starkiller takes it directly into his body and walks forward through the pain. At the end, he unleashes a shockwave so powerful that it strikes fleeing Imperial forces and fills him with the sense that a star has ignited in his chest. The legends tell us that in this last, self-sacrificing moment, he embraces the Force so completely that all of his earlier darkside efforts look like the efforts of a child. When the Emperor later tells Vader that Starkiller is now more powerful than ever, even though he is dead, it sounds like a cruel remark, but it also matches what the story has been building toward. Every time Starkiller faces something that should kill him, what does not kill him only makes him more powerful on the dark side. Even as a memory and an inspiration, his power keeps growing. The fourth reason is that his clone surpasses even the original. Someone with that much power cannot simply be left in the past, which naturally raises the question of how a character even stronger than him could exist. In Legends, the solution is extreme but straightforward. They clone him and unleash his full potential all over again. In Star Wars: The Force Unleashed 2, Vader tries a new experiment. He grows clones of Starkiller on Kamino, hoping to create a version that is loyal, stable, and just as devastating. One of those clones, the one we follow in the story, remembers the emotions and experiences of the original Starkiller. Those memories, and his connection to Juno, push him to break free from Vader. Before that escape, we see just how far his training has gone. In isolation on Kamino, he masters Jarkai, the dual lightsaber style, drawing on Nyman and Ataru techniques. This demands serious physical strength and coordination, but Starkiller shrugs it off, saying that the Force gives him everything he needs. He tells Vader that he is strong and getting stronger, and the story backs him up. He defeats Proxy's training simulations again and again. During one confrontation, he lashes out with a burst of lightning that arcs across the room and catches Darth Vader by surprise. That is not something many characters can say. When he finally decides to escape, he channels the Force so intensely that droid parts and debris rise up and spin around the chamber, and he tears the metal wall outward by sheer will. The escape sequence turns into a battle of minds as well as power. Vader's rage tries to hold Starkiller back, but the clone pits his determination against it. The novel says that all of Vader's resistance falls away as the TIE fighter carrying Starkiller launches into the sky. For once, Vader cannot keep control. The creation has slipped the leash. If the original Starkiller showed how far one life could push the Force, the clone shows what happens when you stack that history on top of a fresh body. He is already starting from a point most Jedi would never reach, and he's only getting stronger. On Cato Neimoidia, Starkiller's raw telekinesis and battlefield control are on full display, showing just how far he has pushed the Force. At one point, he simply flexes his will, feeling the Force swell and rise within him like an invisible muscle, giving him the strength to manipulate the environment itself. With that power, he wrenches a communications tower down and sideways, sweeping it across a landing platform and crushing AT-ST walkers and stormtroopers at the same time. Not stopping there, he hurls other walkers into the ocean, demonstrating both precision and sheer force. When stormtroopers rush him in formation, he effortlessly crushes some and sweeps others aside. Incoming blaster shots have no effect on him. He effortlessly deflects precise shots from the local potentate harmlessly into the floor, while using his double lightsabers to send incoming bolts from stormtroopers flying away from his body. When he faces missile launchers, he doesn't waste time with codes or technical skills. Instead, he crushes the launchers telekinetically, setting off the remaining missiles in a single, bright flash accompanied by a deafening explosion. Even security systems cannot withstand him. Rather than hacking doors or overriding systems, he bypasses them entirely through sheer force power, demonstrating that no technology can match his strength. For him, movement is just another expression of the Force. He crosses the city by leaping from building to building and swinging from handholds, the Force rushing through him like fresh oxygen. When he needs an opening, he nudges a skytram off its rails and guides it into the side of an Imperial compound, tearing a huge hole in the wall, while 6 stormtroopers in his path are brushed aside with a single gesture. This display of power ties directly to his mindset, which we glimpse in a memory from his youth on Ragna 3. In his original life, he once fought his way out of an uprising using only the Force and his wits. It is in that moment that he fully realizes his own destructive potential, and the clone carries that realization forward. Then there is the Gorog. This creature is massive, larger than many spacecraft, and is held in duranium shackles. Most fighters would be crushed without leaving a mark. Starkiller stands his ground behind the strongest force barrier he can summon, letting the Gorog's converging fists slam against an invisible wall. He pours lightning through the duranium shackles into the beast's muscle tissue, turning his restraints into weapons. In the end, he focuses a single pure lightning bolt into the creature's metal anchor, driving the energy into its heart and stopping it dead. Ram Koda reminds him that he is a Jedi and that size means nothing to him, reinforcing the same theme seen in the Star Destroyer scene. Whether he is facing a massive ship, an imposing fortress, or a dangerous monster, Starkiller fights as if size itself is an illusion, showing just how far his power has grown. What makes the clone even more dangerous than the original is that his power is not just physical. It extends to the mind and the environment around him. On Malastare, he uses a force suggestion on a Gran repairman, and the book describes the mind trick as unstoppable as gravity, strengthened by Starkiller's urgent need. He then manipulates the battlefield further, using the Force to absorb all sound around his movements and shrouding himself in shadow so that stormtroopers only see half-formed phantoms, raising false alarms at nothing. With a single flick of telekinesis, he can trigger a life support alarm to distract guards and bend the situation entirely to his advantage. All of this builds naturally toward one of his most shocking feats, the Salvation Incident. To reach the frigate carrying Juno, he dives from orbit, relying on a powerful force shield to survive the heat of re-entry as he strikes the hull. Once aboard, he pushes his senses outward until there is no line between Starkiller and the Salvation itself. From the perspective of the Force, they become a single being. Using that connection, he channels all of his power and blows the entire frigate into a billion pieces, precisely stopping it from colliding with Juno. This is not a small explosion or an accidental overload. It is a controlled, frigate-scale act of destruction executed with perfect precision to prevent disaster. At this point, inert matter, starship hulls, and towers are exactly what he later realizes them to be. No match for the Force, and therefore, no real obstacle to him. If he can accomplish all of this under such extreme circumstances, the question naturally arises: what happens when he is trapped in a tower full of clones of himself, with the real Darth Vader standing in his way once again? The stakes are higher, the threats multiply, and the full scope of his power is about to be tested like never before. Inside the cloning facility on Kamino, Starkiller shows no sign of slowing down. He cuts into a maintenance hatch, then uses a force push to send a flamethrower trooper back into its own squad. And the resulting blast takes out the entire group. He doesn't stop there. He also channels waves of electricity into the massive hangar doors until their systems fry, and then pulls the dead metal panels open by hand, displaying raw, unrestrained power. Even while riding on a Y-wing, Starkiller continues to amplify his abilities. He strengthens the starfighter's shields with his lightsaber and uses the Force to deflect ion torpedoes, seamlessly combining his own strength with the ship's technology in ways most pilots could only imagine. His mastery of both Force and machine makes him a force of destruction that is nearly unstoppable. As the battle on Kamino intensifies, he begins to tear apart the very structure around him. Platforms buckle under the weight of his power. Cloning tubes become improvised explosives hurled at enemies. Wall plates are ripped free under his telekinetic grip and slammed into stormtroopers with lethal precision. At one point, a figure resembling Vader attempts to leap away, only for Starkiller to yank him back down with the Force, later revealing it was just a proxy droid. The significance remains. He can casually pull down something that looks like Darth Vader in mid-leap without breaking a sweat. Then comes one of the clearest demonstrations that Starkiller operates on an entirely different level. Vader unleashes a horde of flawed Starkiller clones, each carrying a fragment of his abilities. They surge at him in a chaotic, uncontrolled wave, yet the single perfected Starkiller fights them all and destroys every last one. He emerges as the sole survivor, proving that one fully realized version of him is stronger than an entire army of lesser copies, even though each clone possesses a fraction of his skill, speed, and raw power. This moment cements just how far beyond ordinary characters he truly has risen. When he finally confronts the real Darth Vader again, this is no longer the same apprentice from the first game. Vader has upgraded his armor with extra insulation to better resist lightning, but it is not enough. Starkiller unleashes a blast so intense that even the new armor cannot absorb it. His lightning overwhelms Vader, disarms him, and leaves the Dark Lord at his mercy, with Starkiller's lightsaber pressed against his throat. At the same time, when stormtroopers threaten Juno, he responds with a force push so massive that it sweeps them off the spire instantly. The attack is brutally efficient and makes it clear once again that squads of soldiers, or even entire battalions, barely register as obstacles when he fully focuses his power. By this point, Vader openly calls him his most deadly creation, and the title fits perfectly. This is a character who has moved star destroyers, slain giant beasts, blown apart a frigate with his mind, and defeated Darth Vader twice, first as the original and later as a clone. The fifth reason is that he refuses to accept limits on the Force. What does all of this actually mean when we return to the claim that Starkiller is more powerful than anyone else? When you line up all the statements and feats from the three main sources, a clear pattern emerges. The Force Unleashed campaign guide describes him as more capable than most common Force users. even as a child on Kashyyyk. It also states that he eventually reaches a level of power beyond what is normally expected of any Force user, and that this extraordinary ability comes from a deadly combination of the Emperor's tutoring and Vader's intense training. The novel Star Wars: The Force Unleashed then shows the results of all that training. Starkiller hunts and defeats Jedi Masters like Ram Koda, Asden Paratus, and Shak Ti, tearing through armies of troopers, tanks, and droids along the way. He even redirects a falling Star Destroyer almost a mile and a half long, using nothing but his will. He defeats Darth Vader once and walks through the Emperor's lightning, unleashing a final surge of power that makes his earlier dark side feats look small by comparison. Juno begins to wonder if he might be too powerful, while Bail Organa, who has witnessed Jedi and Sith in action, admits he has not seen anyone like him since the Clone Wars. Star Wars: The Force Unleashed 2 then picks up that thread and pushes it even further. The clone Starkiller is strong enough to surprise Vader, to tear a tower apart, and to crush AT-STs and troopers with a single swing of a communications tower. He kills the Gorog, a monster larger than most spacecraft, by sending a bolt of lightning straight into its heart. He blows up a frigate in a controlled burst using only the Force and tears through an army of his own flawed clones. In the end, he defeats and captures Darth Vader despite the Dark Lord's improved armor and extensive preparation, proving that the power displayed in the first story was only the beginning. Beyond the feats themselves, the way the stories describe him is just as important. Characters repeatedly note that what does not kill him only strengthens his connection to the dark side. The Emperor emphasizes that he is more powerful than ever, even after death. Juno observes that the man she loves retains the same incredible powers in his cloned form, while General Koda tells the clone that he can sense just how powerful Starkiller has become. Shak Ti also hints at his extraordinary potential, telling the original that he could be so much more, suggesting a capability far beyond what has already been shown. Starkiller's own understanding of the Force sets him apart even further. He believes the Force is stronger than anything anyone can imagine, and that it is people who place limits on it, not the other way around. This perspective explains why he achieves feats no one else has accomplished. Most Jedi and Sith are restrained by what they think is possible, but Starkiller consistently pushes beyond those boundaries, breaking through limits that others accept as unchangeable. The campaign guide reinforces this idea by framing his destiny in a way that highlights his unmatched potential. It suggests that a hero following Starkiller's path can expose enemy Force users to their limits, preventing them from using their full power. In essence, the game material presents him as the peak of what Force users can achieve in that era. He becomes the measure against which all other characters gauge their strength when they realize their own abilities are insufficient. When fans claim that Starkiller is more powerful than anyone else, they are not simply repeating a single line of dialogue. They are responding to the full context of the source material. A boy stronger than many Jedi Knights grows into a secret apprentice capable of moving Star Destroyers, defeating Sith Lords, killing massive monsters, destroying starships, and overwhelming entire armies of his own clones. Across novels, games, and guidebooks, his power is consistently portrayed as beyond ordinary expectations, and each story builds on that idea, proving it in increasingly dramatic and bigger ways. In-universe, Starkiller is what happens when Darth Vader and the Emperor try to forge the ultimate living weapon out of the Force, only to realize they cannot fully control what they create. His life, death, and rebirth demonstrate that when someone stops accepting limits on the Force, they become more powerful than anyone around them, no matter which side they're fighting for. If you're curious about another key decision involving Vader and the Force, check out the next video to discover why Darth Vader never hunted Yoda after Order 66, and what this reveals about his complex relationship with the Force.